Welcome to the Progress Portland podcast. I'm Kip Silverman.
I'm Kat.
Kat, the single named person.
It's
going to
like
talk.
Cher.
It's like, obviously. We're going to talk to Nick Caleb today, attorney at Breach Collective and adjunct at Lewis and Clark College, and ongoing friend of the pod, even though he doesn't know it. But been working with Nick for a couple years, for probably a decade or so, on different things. And Nick, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I'm Nick. I use he, him pronouns. Like y'all said, I environmental attorney by day and am in a union, and I'm an officer at that union, Communication Workers of America, Local 7901. So I spend a lot of time trying to meld climate and labor activism into something that's a synthesis of those things, and try to build power so we can make some real change. And then, Kip, we probably met in like 2012 or 2013, I'm guessing, and we're in the same circles from back then.
Yeah.
And Kat, I became aware of who you were during the 2020 protests when you were around ACLU stuff, and have been following you ever since. And so familiar with both of your game, and stay impressed.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise, appreciate you being here. There are a lot of topics to dive into. I think maybe starting with the Portland Clean Energy Fund, the CEI Hub, the Zenith Terminal, since that's very front and present on things, maybe that's a good place to start. You and I have chatted a little bit on the background of all of that, and there's a lot of unknowns going on there, but I guess the city just did kind of a review audit of the processes that Zenith went through for their new permits, I think it was, and didn't find any issues with that. So, would you start with just what is CI, who is Zenith, and what does that imply with for going forward and making all our lives more dangerous to live, or
Yeah.
something? No color there.
It's acronym salad, and I'll spell out some of these acronyms. But yeah, the CEI hub stands for the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, and that's the site in Northwest Portland along the Willamette River where all of these big circular metal structures are. And many of those tanks, the storage tanks, are holding fuels of different kinds. Some of it's fossil fuels, some of it's so-called renewable fuels, some of it's aviation fuel. And that area is almost entirely fill soil that was built on top of wetlands and Giles Lake and salmon habitat and indigenous fishing areas and all sorts of things that pre-existed the industrialization of that place. And then, starting a little over 100 years ago, kind of like progressively filling in different parts of that and dedicating that new land that they built on top of the wet soils and wetlands into industrial uses. And so they call it an industrial sanctuary now, is a term of art. I think you could also call it a sacrifice zone if you're like me. And so it's become more of a known area in recent years, and by recent years, like a decade, because we know from a evidentiary scientific perspective that if we have earthquake of if we have a significant enough intensity, that a lot of these tanks, the older ones all the way up to the newer ones, will likely spill their contents into the ground and on the river, and the chance of that being ignited is really high. And so it's basically like a disaster waiting to happen. And some of the estimates are that it would be an industrial disaster on the level of like what happened in the Gulf around the BP oil spill, or like the biggest oil spill in U.S. history in the middle of a city.
Plus huge flames. Yeah.
Yeah. So in addition to that being really bad, killing the river for, as long as humans are around. There's also like toxic materials that be floating all over the city, and estimates that like 1,000 people minimum would die immediately from that. And so it's a serious risk that's sitting there. Before the pandemic, we were picking up a lot of steam into making headway at least trying to make those facilities like pay the costs of what cleanup might look like, and to make seismic upgrades and all sorts of policy interventions to try to make that area safer. And the pandemic interrupted that organizing quite a bit by splitting people apart. And now we're kind of like back in, making some progress on policy. So that's like the CEI piece, and there's a lot there. And then Zenith is a Texas-based fossil fuel company that has a facility that it purchased in like 2017 and has turned into the biggest oil and renewable fuels transloading facility at the hub. So it's like the biggest company at the hub now, and also like a repeat legal offender, and in my opinion, misleading cities, state regulators all the time. Well, not just in my opinion, according to the facts. And then yeah, they are trying to sell their facility to an international capital firm right now. So it's a big, messy mix of stuff, and we can unpack and talk about any of that.
Yeah.
Well, so Zenith owns a plot of land there right now, and they want to sell it. Now, what do you know what attracted Zenith initially to Portland, and now who they're trying to sell to and why?
Zenith came to Portland because they are in the business of oil and fossil and other fuel logistics. And so they basically are in the fossil fuel supply chain. They're like a middle person of being able to like take fuel that's moving and move it to another place where it's either combusted or used in industrial processes. And so they saw an investment opportunity in an asphalt facility that they purchased and then converted into an oil by rail facility. Basically, transloading is what they do. And that means taking fuel from one sort of transport medium and moving it to another. So in this case, it comes in by rail, which freak people out because we've had really close near misses in Oregon. And we've also seen some like horrific industrial disasters by rail in recent years nationally. But that stuff comes in on train, parks at the Zenith facility, they heat it up, move it into storage tanks for a little bit, and then they pipe it to a dock that they operate and put it on ships, and it goes elsewhere. That's basically what they do.
My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but they um, started the process of transferring the fuel, and then wanted to expand. The expansion was delayed because of, like you mentioned, some concerns around their compliance and safety. I guess the city just found that they were compliant, which begs the question of what are the current policies looking over everything. But their desire to expand was thwarted for a while, which that would lead me to believe that this is why they want to sell it to an equity firm, because they want to move out of it, and equity firms tend to come in, liquidate, for lack of a better word, or optimize, quote unquote, and then dump within 4 to 5 years at a different rate. So to recoup their investment, but usually by gutting whatever they touch. And we don't know a lot about the private equity firm. We don't really know where things are at. But on top of that, moving from a public entity to a private equity firm means there's even less transparency. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good summary. And there's like, 2018, 2019, people were really mad about this. We were holding these humongous fora. Like we had a really big packed audience at the University of Portland where people were speaking out. The entire city council was talking about how we're going to stop Zenith at that time. And like Zenith wanted to get all these expansions and its franchise agreement, and they wanted to build rail unloading racks. And a lot of that stuff the city just said no to because public was so overwhelmingly opposed. The youth climate movement was like in
Mm.
full swing. And so like the momentum was with us really strongly. And then a year later, the pandemic hits and basically like obliterates so much of our social like networks of activists and organizers working together. And we did see the city deny a what's called a land use compatibility statement for Zenith, which is basically like a local piece of an air permit. And that was a huge deal. Everybody's really excited about it. And while we were fighting that in court, the city and some intervener environmental organizations, oh my gosh, my dog is like squeezing a toy now.
That's perfect, man. A little bit of ambience. Ambient.
Yeah. So while, this lawsuit is going on over this really important denial of a land use compatibility statement, without it, Zenith couldn't get an air permit and arguably couldn't legally operate. So people in 2021 were pretty excited. And then basically that's the last time that the good news about Zenith was happening. Because after that, we had what a lot of people call the backroom deal with Zenith, where several counselors, Carmen Rubio, Dan Ryan, literally like went to the oil facility and like struck a deal on site about how they were going to basically like forget all the stuff that had happened before, and they were going to allow Zenith to expand because they're doing renewable fuels. And that sounds good compared to bad fossil fuels. And it's like chemically the same danger, climate wise, arguably not even better. But they kind of like went and did that behind closed doors. And then for the last almost 4 years, we've been like trying to like claw back some local authority over them. And it's been hard because what the path that they set us on during that period makes it really hard for us to undo things. So not much help from our last city council, but then the new city council came in, and many of them had been really attentive to Zenith and CEI Hub issues. Even the mayor had made all sorts of pledges about Zenith that he immediately violated. But it was like a big campaign thing. And then the first action of the new council, the first formal action, was the Zenith Accountability Resolution, which basically said, yes, community, all the concerns you've been bringing up in prior years, that's true. We agree with that. Like as a matter of policy, like the city council agrees with you, and then set forward several investigations for like the mayor and the auditor to carry out. The auditor just refused to do an investigation because of capacity issues. And then the mayor kind of like moved forward with some of those investigations. And the report that you were talking about before was one of the mayor led investigations into whether Zenith had violated its franchise agreement. And the
Okay.
city said, no, they didn't. And we have concerns about that investigation.
So it wasn't the auditor's office. It was some policy analyst or somebody dove in, or okay.
Yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
basically there's like the way that the bureaus work at the city. You have a number of people, senior leadership's been around forever, and they kind of like, keep going up the promotion chain. And many of those folks were involved in the backroom deal in 2022 and kind of facilitated Zenith's permanence here. And so even though everybody in the community that's paying attention thinks it's bad and underhanded and all the rest, like they're really insulated inside that network. And so the council calling for these investigations was a really good sign, but they basically, they like investigated themselves in the franchise agreement investigation.
Okay.
And they were like, the mayor allowed those same people to like set the scope of what the investigation would look like. So they're like, okay, here's the research and here are the things that we think we should look at. And then we did our own analysis. And we found out that nothing bad would happen. And then we all started blowing the whistle about that. And Councilors Green and Murillo also were like, this kind of looks like a conflict of interest. And then they were like, oh, oops, we'll hire this outside law firm to do an independent investigation. And so everyone was like, okay, we'll wonder what this will look like. And basically, the law firm just did an investigation they didn't even do an investigation. They did a review of the investigation that the city did. So the city created like a universe that it felt comfortable in. And then they hired a law firm to come in and basically said, in our limited universe, like, do you agree with us? And the law firm said yes. And so for me, I've been like, well, that's interesting. And I will look at, what you all said there. But There's a lot of stuff that's not included in the investigation, including all this stuff going back to 2019 about, like lying to the city about how many oil trains are going to come through the city and telling Ted Wheeler that they were done handling tar sands and a bunch of other things. They didn't include lobbying violations that Zenith got in 2022. So there's like violations of law and misleading conduct that they didn't include in the investigation. And my instinct here is that they didn't include those things because in the franchise agreement, you can cancel the franchise agreement if you find instances of fraud and deceit. And so just like very curious, they didn't include any of the instances
They
that
left
look
out
the
the
most like
fraud and
fraud and
deceit.
deceit. Yeah.
Okay, go
Yeah.
figure. All right,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it's very complicated, unfortunately. So it makes it hard to do like popular review of this stuff. But I'm sure
Right.
in the weeks and months ahead, I'll be spending more time kind of like unpacking that because this fucking Zenith train never ends.
Yeah.
So even though we have a very, very good council now, no doubt, having the folks we have, we still have administrative bodies that are left over from the previous council who are still going to be pulling the strings for Zenith and making sure they're okay. Is that true? Accurate?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very accurate. I mean, my opinion is that the new council came in guns blazing, and actually, I think they had like a good analysis of how the charter was going to split up responsibilities between the administration and council, and they just have been unable to break through and kind of like impose a new set of standards on the administrative side of the government so far. And there's like it's not really related to the subject matter, but the hearings that are going to happen over the lost housing money and all that kind of stuff, I think are related to the general idea of like, can a council actually like wrangle in a new culture in the administrative side of government? We're like
Right.
finding out in real time if it's possible.
Yeah. I not that I want to step away from CI, Zenith, and the horrible, horrible air around that entire facility. I live across the river from it, and it carries over into my backyard. That's it's a great segue into a lot of the intentions the city council has put forward in the last year dial into the issues that Portlanders have been wanting to have traction on for a long time, including climate and climate justice. And they just, I guess, got rid of the climate subcommittee and are baking it into civic life or something, was, I think I heard the argument. Maybe that's a great segue from what you were just talking about. Like, what the fuck is that going to do to any kind of focus on climate, and how do we parcel that out and still have traction and focus on these things, because we know for I mean the Willamette's been a super fun site for decades and one of the least funded and improved ones. So despite the Human Access Project telling you it's safe to just go drink Willamette water, what does that do to us as far as a focus from a legislative standpoint?
I mean, it definitely is a blow to the climate movement in the short term because we, saw that committee that was chaired by Steve Novick and Angelita Murillo hold some like really interesting hearings. So even when they weren't even doing just like policy work, they had hearings on like, what is a renewable fuel? Like, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And like let experts and climate advocates come in and actually like talk about a thing that the city administration didn't want to talk about for like 3 years. And so we got to daylight conversations, have like in-depth conversations. We got to talk about gas industry greenwashing. It was a place where environmentalists were able to come in and like make spot changes to like Superfund rules at some point because of the access through that committee. And so from like, in my opinion, it was like an enormously useful committee for environmentalists and climate advocates. And so, yeah, we more or less just like lost a place to do politics, which sucks. And the subject matter of that committee still includes climate, but the leadership is now with Alana Pertolgini and Eric Zimmerman, and neither of them are like super climate people or really excited to like connect the community into hearings. And so maybe I'm wrong and I will be surprised, but my best guess is that we are not going to see the type of activity in that civic life committee that we saw when it was co-chaired by Angelita Murillo. It's kind of complicated, but there's like a CEI hub policy process that's been going on for almost a year now that's eventually going to turn into code that's proposed in front of council. And in my opinion, it would be pretty bad if that started in that committee, civic life, but council just created a committee of the whole, which is going to hear basically like big issues as just like basically like a subcommittee of the council that's just like the council itself. And so big items like the CEI hub policy and the Portland Clean Energy Fund are going to go directly to that committee of the whole. So, and there's a few other like climate policies that have been stewing, and I think they might go there too. So in terms of the like practical impact of policies that are already moving through, it might not have a tremendous impact, but the like acculturation of a like environmentalists have a place in this city. We can get hearings, we can like hold evidence and bring our experts. We have totally lost on that, which is, in my opinion, like a really big loss.
Do you think the committee of the whole will be a good spot to also discuss not having money moved from PSEF to the PPB? Because, I mean, the PPA has been trying to move. I think they have a ballot initiative to just stab the PSEF funds for, what do they need? More cops again? Where are we?
It's like, yeah, it's mostly they want 25% of what's in excess of the like original estimates that PSEF was going to bring in, I think is how it's framed. And yeah, they want it for a variety of funding related issues for police. And the way that they wrote their initiative, it kind of insulates a lot of it from like oversight from the council too. So it's kind of like creates a little PPA or PPB slush fund if it passed. And there's been a challenge to the ballot title that a hearing last week. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, it's like one of the many runs at PSEF that have happened and will probably continue to happen.
So I have two attorneys in front of me.
Yeah,
So
well, one of them's just a clown.
yeah, well, okay.
Two of them are clowns, if that's the standard. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
One's doing product placement right now, so
Yeah.
that's all right. No,
Oops.
all right, Kylie Jenner. Anyway, deep cut, not really. She's going to edit this out. It's fine. So let me ask you this, both of you, because I'm really curious about this. The Portland Clean Energy Fund, PSEF, was a ballot initiative that was voted in by Portland voters to say we want a part of business tax to go to climate related challenges that we have in solving those problems. Ballot initiatives feel very specific, right? The majority of Portlanders said, yes, this is what we want to do. It raised more money than expected, which is a great problem to have. How does another ballot initiative come in and try to pull money out of a previous ballot initiative and still try to be valid about it? It feels like a seriously anti-democratic process, especially when it's funded by interests that are, for some reason, probably not aligned with the original ballot initiative.
Yeah, I mean, part of this legal challenge is asking that question, if whether this
Okay.
kind of like envelope that was created for PSEF is something that you can even file another ballot initiative and try to open up. My instinct is that it probably can for a few different reasons. One is that it's the way that the ballot initiative didn't change the charter, which I think maybe looking back, people would have run a charter amendment as opposed to just a normal ordinance style initiative petition. Because even though it set up this infrastructure and committees and like PSEF is like sort of an independent group, it's just a creation of law under the council. And so the council could change it if they wanted to. They get pressure to not do that, but they could. So like just changing it by initiative isn't like, it's not a big legal challenge, right?
Okay.
There might be some stumbling blocks, but in general, like if you can create something by an initiative, then you could change it by an initiative. And that's pretty consistent in law. I think we'll see how eager Portlanders are to do that. I think the question of democracy will be like, can the police get enough signatures to put that on the ballot? And are people really excited about like taking a big chunk out of the climate fund right now? I don't think so, but I could be wrong. And then, the other thing that's on is the Blazers basically like going after piece of money at the same time. So
Right.
everybody wants a chunk of the climate justice fund right now.
Well, as long as the tasers in the sports are renewable energy,
Solar power taser.
solar power taser, just gonna hold it up and charge it for an hour before you can. Anyway, all right. Apologies. Go ahead, Kat. You had a question, I
Oh,
think.
I was going to say, even if that can be changed, I feel like the purpose and the substance will come into question. But also, the Moda Center one is really interesting because that is Mayor Wilson just totally sideswiping and taking another route completely. PSF is written down that it's supposed to be for nonprofits, and
Yeah.
Moda Center is far from being a nonprofit. So he's just fucking it all up, is what I'll say.
Yeah. I see this as like it's like a, I don't know this for a fact. So this is a speculation, but it looks like PBA type fingerprints all over at Portland Business Alliance. Cause for years they've been trying to crack the fund to try to use it for other things. And they hate it because it's a corporate tax, like on gross receipts. So they're like, well, we're corporations, we own the fund. And they've been mad that it's been used on climate justice since its inception. And so they've been trying to find ways to undermine it. They try to do it through like audits, and they try to get one of their like, chosen administrators to move money to bureaus and all sorts of ways of like moving it uh, and diluting the power of that fund in the past. And so now I think they were like, ooh, this is a good one. Like, let's engineer this kind of like crisis. And we've got like the state legislature, and we've got Tina Kotek, and we've got some other people like big shots that are willing to kind of like help us create the belief that this is a crisis. And now they're like, well, everybody else is doing their part, and we just need to take, a little $70 million out of the climate justice fund to renovate a basketball facility while our city has an enormous budget crisis. So I don't know, like we'll see, but I think they did it in a way, for like an ordinary Portlander, right, who's maybe not as plugged into the politics, maybe they're viewing it as like an emergency because they like the Blazers and feel culturally attached. I don't know. I'm not. My head is not in that land, so I don't know how that rallies. But I think that's their kind of like move, right? Is like, okay, well, we couldn't get piece up money this other way, but maybe through this like popular thing, we can finally crack it open and start to use it for other things.
Well, yeah, and the whole fear of the Blazers might leave, and we don't have an HVAC, and God forbid, and you're watching a Blazers game, and then everyone gets COVID, and it's like, oh, shut up.
Well, and there's nothing to prevent the Blazers from leaving anyway. It's a franchise. Whoever buys it can say, "Oh, you built the new stadium. The color's wrong. We're going to Detroit," and that's it, right? Although the Pistons might have something to say. I don't follow football, but anyway, the whole point being, it's silly. Um, Perfect pivot point to also what we're really eager to talk about, which is traditionally controlling interests in Portland and how they influence politics and where they're coming from, whether it's, Portland Business Alliance. But yeah,
Portland Metro Chamber.
Portland Metro Chamber, because as opposed to Portland Outlying Chamber, which would mean that like East Portland would have a say in things, which they would not or do not. I'm just rambling at this point. Let's go back to let's talk about dark money in our politics, how they're being influenced, and we can go back to our multiple conversations with Mike Schmidt and how the whole Schmidt Show campaign, which was basically bankrolled by people who want to see the chamber be successful, and PBA and other folks talking about how horrible Portland is the entire time while they're saying we're not investing enough in Portland. And we're having a brand new round of this, but now it's focused on the more progressive and I would say dialed into community type elected officials we have. And let's dive in. Let's talk about that because that's going to be a huge, I think, canard in the whole upcoming 2026 election.
Yeah, maybe I'll start by just kind of giving my like version of what I think happened in Portland over the last like decade,
Yeah.
or longer. Because I think that, since I've been involved in local politics, I always perceived the Portland Business Alliance and the like parking lot magnates and the like sort of developers downtown as having outsized influence over
Mhm.
elections and governance. And I just kind of like took that for granted, back to like 2012 moving forward. And to the extent that they had a problem getting what they wanted, which is not very often, they kind of just like adapted to Portland by um, like just avoiding big like cultural battles and not having them head on. So, for example, like when the Portland Clean Energy Fund was put on the ballot, PBA didn't like it, but they didn't oppose it because they probably did some polling and they sort of saw the climate movement and were just like, well, we'll just dodge the head on fight and we'll try to like kill it later administratively.
Mm.
Right. It's more or less what they did with the audits. And so that's been like, they can like kind of dodge the big cultural fights. And then because they have power inside the building, they can like do their damage there. And that's been more or less how it goes. That also meant that we didn't elect a lot of like progressive people like, Chloe Daly ran as a grassroots candidate and, was probably one of the more progressive people, but like by the standards of the counselors that we have now, probably would be considered kind of like middle of the road compared to a lot of those folks. And Joanne Hardesty, even who I think was like a really like tough and good legislator. Like I never really considered her to be like a leftist in any
Mhm.
way. I thought she was really strong on police accountability. But she was kind of like a reformer, like liberal type that was really like good on several issues. I didn't see her like as a raging communist or anything like that. And so like, but something happened in 2020, which happened to everybody, which is the COVID lockdown just like created this cultural event that just like launched people in different directions. And I think a lot of like people that used to see themselves as like centrist liberals got radicalized to the right at that time. And people were in
Mm.
their houses and they were like watching TV about how Portland is burning down every night and they weren't interacting with other people and they weren't like able to just kind of see what is propaganda and what's reality because of the conditions of that. So I think, and maybe people like experience, I think people like actually experience a lot of trauma during COVID too, but it
Absolutely.
resulted in this like right wing movement that started out at like school boards, right? Is like getting
Mhm.
wins for right wingers in school boards. And then up and down the West Coast, you had people being like, let's get rid of all our progressive DAs. And Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, same playbook was used. The ousted Joanne Hardesty with like
Yep.
sort of like moderate, tough on crime and anti-houseless kind of like campaigning, right? Got rid of her. And so like there was like 3-year period where they were just like, we finally get to be who we are and we don't have to hide it anymore. We don't have to pretend that we like are Portlanders, but we want tax cuts or whatever. Like they're like, we are tough on crime Republicans. And they like did that for 3 years. But then I think what happened is like the pandemic lockdown ended and people started talking to each other again and going out public and we're like, okay, I don't actually live in a hellscape. It's like we have problems, but like,
The
I go
buildings are
together and
still
talk to.
standing
Yeah.
somehow, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the sort of like not looking at TV propaganda and actually interacting with other people in the community and exchanging information in a more organic way, I think just like re-normalize people a little bit.
Mhm.
There's still this like reactive right wing contingent that's still active. And because they're in a bubble and they only talk to themselves, and because when they come up with stuff, they can get it on the TV news and then that stuff comes back to them, they still think that they're in that space. But I think they're
Mm.
becoming more marginal over time. And one of the signals of that was like the fact that we created a new council structure. I think that was a
Yeah,
big
charter
thing.
reform, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and then the outcome of the council elections, which I think like a lot of those right wing institutions, they were sort of worried about, but I think this is like their worst nightmare of like an outcome.
Right.
So now, like you're saying, now their job, they think their task is like, okay, well, these people are like pretty popular on the issues, they're connected with community, they like do a good job of generating press and support of the things they like. So like, how can we make them look corrupt, and how
Mhm.
can we make them look out of touch, or like create these little scandals? And then the blueprint's going to be like in the fall, just pumping a ton of money into like dark money advertisements to make them all seem like they're
Yeah.
really evil. But it's like really small number of people that are actually going to be putting that money into those advertisements.
To put a pin, cherry or something on top of that. If memory serves, I went to look at the Secretary of State website on the amount of money spent with a particular media firm for when Gonzalez was running against Joanne Hardesty. He spent over $500,000 to defeat her, which was pretty much unheard of for a city council seat in Portland, right? So all that money came from different places, but funneled into a smear campaign, essentially, to oust her, and still didn't win by that much of a margin. So, yeah, wild stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they also like elected Nathan Vasquez in a primary. I'm not sure that Vasquez would have won that in a general election. Like, I think we might have already been
Right.
on the downswing of that conservative wave, but because it was a primary election, that was kind of like their last like big win.
Yeah, yeah, and the fallout from that probably needs to be another whole episode. But there's news right now that Vasquez is really upset that a bunch of criminals are going to be let go because there's not enough public defenders to represent them, and it's been over 60 or 90 days for some of those lighter offenses. Yet he's amping up lighter offense arrests and prosecutions. And I'm like, basic math, like to be a DA, basic math ought to be a requirement. So you can't do both and complain. That being said, let's one anecdotal story that I've told before. I'm going to mention it real briefly. During the City Club of Portland big meeting at the Alberta Rose talking about charter reform, which is where I first inkling I thought it might actually happen. And I have been championing this and talking to whomever I possibly could since my brief stint working in City Hall. But I overheard a conversation between some older, I would guess, architect type people, just from what they were talking about. But the three times charter reform came up prior, they got together a handful of people, meaning 4 or 5 people, and put their money in and started a campaign to go against it. But they were like, this round, I think it's not a bad idea. And I'm like sitting there going, you fuckers, you have, when it didn't benefit you directly, you were against it, and there were 5 of you that defeated it, as opposed to letting it be argued out on its merits and let people vote on it, right? Which is exactly how old school Portland runs. And it feels like that is what the push coming up now: smear everybody you can, like you said, create some crises. So, what can we talk a little bit about those players and who we should be looking out for, and what can we do to say, no, we're not going to let you do this again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also really interested in Kat's take on this because I know that she has a nice dossier and a long-standing amount of knowledge. But like I
Mm.
was watching last summer and into the fall these like series of like ethics complaints getting filed, right? And they were like, oh, like counselors are talking to each other over text messages, and that's illegal. And I was kind of like, well, it might, it's interesting to find out what they were texting each other about, but it doesn't seem like a scandal that they were talking. They're legislators, they're legislating together, right? And then,
Caucusing is a thing, I've heard.
yeah. And then it was like, and then so we had sort of like the way that the news was presenting stuff was just like, oh, these people who are telling you that they want to work together toward progressive things, it's like bad that they're working together and maybe unethical. And then later there was like a retreat on council that got ethics complaints too. And so it's just kind of like, is it illegal for progressives to like talk to each other about politics? And part of this stems from our like state rules around serial communications are like weird, really weird and broken. I think it makes it really hard to legislate. Um, they're trying to, I think, uh, Representative Graber is trying to fix that in the legislature, like as we speak,
Mhm.
short session. But I just started looking at this and I was like, okay, well, who's filing the complaints? It's
Mhm.
like Bob Weinstein and like, Chiata Thompson and like these people who I like kind of knew in other contexts. And then you just sort of like start just putting those people on a piece of paper and be like, okay, well, who are these people? How do they orient to one another? And like, okay, well, you're the person who started the PAC that's going to like pump money, Partnership for Progress, with Bob Weinstein, Eli Arnold, and Vadim Merzirski. And they're like all failed candidates, right?
Yep.
Who are like sad that they lost and it ruined their lives, I guess. And start a PAC to basically like attack the people that beat them, and then that combined with some other like packs that have been established, they're just like kind of all working together to like create these like really ticky tack kind of appearances of scandal that are not actually scandalous. So they're hoping that like they'll get the ethics commission to be like, oh yeah, that was bad. So then they can run dark ads. They don't want to talk about politics. They don't want to talk about policy. They don't want to talk
Mhm.
about like ICE abducting like our community. They don't want to talk about budgets except for to the extent they want homeless people swept with budgets, right? All of it is like an attempt to be like the governance is bad and to try to create a bogeyman and avoid all the like major politics that are going on is more or less the blueprint. So I just started like looking into this more and making videos about it on Instagram. I'm not really an
Mhm.
Instagram person, but I'm like having to learn because that's how people communicate. Um, and then, so I was like trying to do research and learn about this. And then I read that Mercury article that came out where Brian Owendoff was like texting with his group
Yep.
chats with his phone and somebody took pictures. All these things that I was like kind of started paying attention to. I was like, oh, okay, they're verified because
Right.
Brian Owendoff like basically like showed somebody behind him his text, right? But it's like, and it's like, okay, well, that's the network. Like, it's kind of funny that like it's this small of a number of people that are like working with one another, but like
Mhm.
it really is. Like there's like 20 dudes in a trench coat and they all like, and that's like the right wing political movement in Portland, right? Like, and other people like pay them to do stuff and there's money that comes from elsewhere, but it's like, it's the same actors, like the same
Yeah.
people that were like in those chats and filing ethics complaints are some of the same people that were like astroturfing like pro police protests during the budget crisis and trying to pretend it was like grassroots and organic. And then one of
Mhm.
Julia Brim Edwards' staffers was like sending out press releases on when she was supposed to be working. And so she was like telling everybody that it's just like, it's all astroturf stuff. It's all a small number of people. And so it's funny because they kind of were like, they had some momentum in that direction. And then it seems just like in the last like month and a half, it's kind of like because of reporting in the Portland Mercury is just kind of like, we're talking about this a lot differently, right? Because the
Right.
mask is off. Like we know who is, and maybe if Brian Owendoff wouldn't have texted about Angela Murillo being Angela Burrito or whatever he said and like came off looking like a racist, like maybe people wouldn't have paid attention in the same way, but he did and they did. And so like now there's an entry point into this and it's like, yeah, it's not that many people. But
Yeah.
I'm super curious to hear kind of like how you,
Well, Vicky Payne, who runs Future Portland, was the one who was working at the county and got fired for sending out press releases and spending more time on her little pack than anything else. That pack, I want to say, is tied in with Vadim and Renee, if I remember. I might be wrong. But then, yeah, the Partnership for Progress, first of all, terrible website, terrible URL, easy to spoof it if somebody has 15 bucks and wants to buy URLs that sound like it, like have at it, knock yourself out. But no, it's basically the same people and occasionally some extras like Tiana Tozer will pop in with John DiLorenzo filing another lawsuit. You'll get, who is it? Kevin Looper pops back in for like a soundbite or something, but it's basically the same folks. They want, from what I can tell, they want county elections to go in their favor again. They're definitely gonna set up and try it. And yeah, with the district elections coming up, they're gonna try and find somebody who will jump in. But they definitely have lost footing, which is nice. But this kind of feels like I mean, you remember being a little kid and you're watching a cartoon and it's the same bad guys and the same good guys every week? And it's not as cool as Transformers, it's more something stupid like Smurfs and Gargamel, and it's the same fuck up every week. That's what this group feels like. The thing is that they sometimes have a little more money, or they've already had the ear of somebody in council, and I don't
Mhm.
know if they still do, but clearly Dan Ryan talks to them, you know? The fact that in that text thread, he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna text Dan," and then Dan spits out something, and it's like, "Oh, I see how this works," which also embarrassed Dan Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I think the new we're in this like interregnum period right now with the new council where we had this like big progressive wave for the most part. I mean, as council is governed, you've sort of like seen the extent of where that ends and kind of like where the schisms are. A lot of the stuff turns out to be like 6-6, and some people
Yeah.
that like campaigned as progressives tend to like align in more sort of like moderate conservative politics against the left more often, which is interesting dynamic. But I think part of that has to do with a uncertainty on behalf of like the counselors and also like their backers of like whether this is a permanent shift, right? Like, was this just a fluke? And I think it's same for kind of like the mayor's staff and the city administrators and like the high level directors and the bureaus. I think they're all kind of just hoping that this was a fluke and that Portland basically gets rid of all these leftists next time, and then they can return back to like governing the city how they want to. So I think they're all just sort of like, let's just hold the line. It'll be a passing thing. And then once, Green, Maria, and Kuyama Lane are kicked out, then we can be like, see, it wasn't real. Like what Portlanders want is this like timid liberalism that we call progressive when there's nothing to our left. And as soon as there's something to our left, we all create these like harsh conservative boundaries and governance. But if there's no left wing, they never have to do the like conflict oriented politics. They can all just be like, we're all libs in Portland and stuff. So I think that's what they're hoping for. And
Seems like it.
yeah. And so like, that's the question. Like, will it go that way? I think these folks are going to have a lot more staying power with ranked choice voting, but we haven't seen it. So we'll see.
Yeah. It's such a craven approach to politics. The thing that has always kind of drove me nuts about it is if you can't get people to vote for your platform because you have good arguments, shut the fuck up and sit down. That's if you've lost 5 elections in a row, Walmart always needs greeters. Just find a different line of work, right? But I do feel you're right with the just blatancy of those texts that were revealed in the Merc, and just how fucking hateful it is, and it's the same cast of characters. It would be hopefully a lot easier that as they put their new smear campaigns together to just call them out and say, same people, do you really want to listen to a fucking racist, right? Time to leave Portland, go to Idaho, go to New Oregon or whatever they want to call it, right? But stop trying to influence things because it's not lining your pockets the right way. So I'm hoping that's what comes out of a lot of that's transpired over the last several months, because that's what it kind of feels like to me. With the ranked choice voting and what we see coming up, and we will start diving into talking to elected officials and new candidates that pop up that meet the values of the platform that we have on Progress Portland, because that's how we got started with everything. I do feel like the ranked choice voting gives a voice to people who never would have had a chance anyway. And the first election was daunting, let's put it kindly, daunting to most people trying to wade through ranked choice voting and whatever 40 candidates we had in D2 alone. It should not be quite as scary this time. And hopefully, with fewer candidates and understanding that it does work and we do see results that the majority of us do want, we can be more mindful about how we lift people and the conversations we have about all the pressure against those folks. So, I don't know that I have a question there beyond what do you think is the best way for people to stay informed, get involved? Can they just like stop by and help walk the dogs? What's the best modes forward? And I'm going to ask both of you that question.
I'm a host. Don't ask me nothing.
Yeah, no, no, you have to give a little more. No,
Do you want to go first, Kat?
No.
Okay, I can go. Yeah, I mean, I have been in and around Portland for most of my adult life, and one of the things I always loved about this place is that compared to a lot of other places in the US, like people really try to like learn and understand and have like good depth of knowledge about what's going on. And that's becoming harder and harder with like AI shit and media organizations getting like collapsed, and just like the general kind of like media landscape is so unhinged for the most part. But I think, I mean, I'm hoping that people like take the time to learn and understand the subtext around a lot of these elections and like who people represent. I think you were right, Kip, when you are saying it's cowardly politics to hide behind like PACs and dark money advertising. I think I agree. And that the way that, like stand up and say what you believe, like if you don't think that we should be paying attention to ICE, abducting people in their streets, or we shouldn't be confrontational with the Trump administration. It's just like, own that as yourself. Like, if
yeah,
you think that all we should be doing is cutting taxes for rich people when fascism is coming, like, own that, because I think the populace in Portland is not like, even people that I would consider sort of like formally in the like moderate range. I think those people are like trying to defeat fascism right now and actually do want their local elected officials to be in that fight with them. So I want to have that conversation, and I don't want it
yeah,
to be like hiding behind like stuff. So it's a bit of a gift here that some of these folks have like told us who they are, so that we can look and be like, oh, okay, if I see this name of this pack spending on something, like I know who those people are. I know what they're
right.
about. But yeah, like anybody can do that work. We've got high quality journalists, but like, Kat, I'm sure you've done this a bunch, but you can, and Kip, you were saying before, you can like go look on Orstar and see who's putting money into PACs. Like you can do public records requests. Like there's all sorts of ways of finding this information out. And the more that people talk to each other and share this and don't rely on random Instagram accounts and TV media to educate us, like the better
Yeah.
off we'll be. And I'm kind of like, I think it's a progressive place and way more left leaning than has historically been represented. And so I think if people do that, then I feel like our politics will kind of hold in that place. But we'll see.
Yeah, don't vote because of a billboard. Do a little more effort or work into it. In fact, that's a great point. We'll add Orstar to the webpage when we post this, and a little bit of description of how people can go look up stuff for yourself. At least state
Mm-hmm.
of Oregon, a lot of this is super transparent, which is kind of awesome. And with some of the campaign finance reforms coming into play, I think this year, in fact, it should actually stunt some of the money coming in from out of state, at least without disclaimers and such. So there's a lot going on there.
My final question would be, so we've talked a lot about city council. What about our Multnomah County commissioners? I mean, they're
Mm.
having an election soon to get a new chair. Depending who wins that, then a seat opens up. Do you think that some of these dark money conservative folks are going to also try and push that way? Because that's where I'm starting to pay a little more attention. And I haven't seen a candidate rise up or anything yet.
Yeah, I know that there are two candidates running for chair right now. There's Julia Brim Edwards and Shan Singleton, who's currently, so they're both commissioners currently and are running. But yeah, I tend to agree that this is the race that the Eye of Sauron is more fixed on. Like I think they really care about the city council ones, but they sort of know the math is like iffy. And Julia Brim Edwards, who is like, from the point of view of somebody who's like in the Portland Business Alliance, is like, this is their like great white hope, right? Like this is like a former Nike lobbyist who's come in, and she's been very careful. I think her politics, it was good for her to have somebody, Sharon Myron, sort of like say the words so that she didn't have to say them when she was on council, right? Sharon could kind of like pick fights with the chair and like throw a bunch of stuff. And then Brim Edwards kind of be like, well, I'm the reasonable person that's going to
Yep.
say the exact same things, but like in a different tone and all that kind of stuff and come off that way. But I think that's like, as there's like crisis happening at the city for that group of people, I think they believe they have an opportunity to entrench a new leader that's like their favorite person. And I think they understand that if they can elect Brim Edwards to county chair, then they might be able to make her governor at some point, right? Like this is like, they see her as like a shining star, right? And so for me, I think that is a really important race. It's also the first county chair race that's ever going to have been ranked choice voting, because that's getting phased in, which is new, and we'll see how that plays out. But that dynamic will surely shift the way things are going. It's not going to be decided in a primary. It's going to be decided a general election with a lot of progressives in other races, a lot of progressive like institutions out rallying. So I think it'll be very interesting. But yeah, you see some signals sometimes, like last year, the county signaled that they were going to start doing like economic planning at the county. And you're like, why are they doing that? And the way I read that is like, they're like, oh, because like Mitch Green is on Portland City Council and is trying to do like lefty economics. And he's, a bureaucrat that is obsessed with numbers. And he poses a huge problem for like entrenched interests and putting pressure on Prosper and other groups that sort of like have traditionally funneled money to the preferred recipients of that class of people. And so they're like, well, what if we just like created that over at the county instead, is like the genius brain way that they're approaching this. So we'll see. I don't think that their like plans are that good or are going to lead anywhere, because ultimately they just want fucking tax cuts. Like regardless of what they say about, oh, services aren't working well and stuff, like the class of people that are putting money behind this, they just want tax cuts and they want to otherwise just kind of like secede from society. Like that's where they're going. They're not like ruling class people, most of them, except for, a few of our billionaires. They're like the next tier down, but they resent ordinary people in almost the exact same ways and want to be away from us and want to have their own private infrastructure that they can rely on and not have to share with the rest of us. And so that's that politics. That's where it's going toward. They want to secede from the rest of society and let us wallow, in unpaid for decaying services with no healthcare, right? Like that's the direction of that. I just don't like, they're not putting out anything forward. Like it's just like, give us tax cuts during fascism. So I don't know. I don't know how that race will go. It's a little bit different demographics than the city races are, and it's not districted. It's like a citywide into areas like Gresham and stuff. But I don't know. I feel like this is going to be an interesting election. I think people are really fucking pissed when they go to vote, and they're going to be voting against conservatives. And so I think every conservative that's running is going to try to paint themselves as a lib, like normal in Portland, maybe even more so. And we'll see a lot of kind of like resistance paraphernalia and propaganda. But if people are attentive and savvy, they're going to kind of see what underlies this type of politics. It's very cynical.
And well, it's a good cynicism, but I think I would agree with that assessment. And we talked to Shannon when she was running for county commissioner, and recommend people go to the website and search back on that podcast. It was a great conversation. She's really coming from a place of genuineness and ability to bridge things that we complain about every day. Like, city, county can't work together. Well, it could. You need somebody who's willing to do the work to make that happen. And all about Shannon Singleton and seeing her succeed in this. Let's talk about what your Instagram is so they can follow you. How can they support and get more involved?
Yeah, I posting videos on, the handle is Nick Caleb 1917, I think. And I hope I don't spend too much time doing it. I'm not as excited about, but we'll see. It's just like how people communicate in this moment, unfortunately. the content I'll be posting will be some stuff that's like work related, so about climate and fossil fuel industry, and then a lot on like local politics and some of this like behind the scenes stuff. I feel like I have an eye for some of that, and there seems to be a lot of interest. And then, yeah, also through my union, getting more involved in kind of like anti-ice type activities, and so probably will post some of that stuff there. But yeah, I mean, if you're in any kind of like progressive organizing group in Portland right now, there's chances are that our bodies of work are overlapping in some way. So I'd say less about getting in touch with me and more about just kind of like finding space that you want to organize in, and we'll probably meet there is my guess. Like join an organization, learn how to organize, go join like one of the perk Ice Watch things, or if you're in a union, like agitate in your union to get active on that. You can join like 350 PDX has like a great volunteer training stuff if you're in climate justice work. Like there's so many organizations in Portland and in Oregon that like just love to bring in and put volunteers in. So that's my recommendation. Worry less about me. I'm a gadfly. I'll be doing shit, but like join organizations and learn how to organize.
Perfect. Right on. Nick, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Progress Portland is also on Facebook and Instagram, and we have event listings and updates on our website, progressportland.org. There's a content form on our website if you'd like to help out or have questions or comments. Our theme music is by the Portland band Helvetia.